When buying a home with a mortgage, you'll need money for your down payment as well as closing costs. However, the closing costs can be paid for by the seller if negotiated into the contract. There are really two times when you'll be able to request a seller credit. One is prior to submitting your initial offer on a home, and two is after your home inspection has taken place. And for this to be most effective, it's important that you know how much closing costs will be on top of your down payment. Let's talk about down payment in comparison to closing costs. So your down payment is your own funds or gift funds, right? Money you're getting from a relative that you're gonna use for your purchase, but that's money that you're putting into the property, which becomes equity in that home. Now, you've heard me talk about this in other videos. Your down payment is the difference between the purchase price of the property and how much you're borrowing for that property. Your closing costs, on the other hand, are true costs that you're going to incur when buying a home. Now, these costs come from multiple places. Come from the lender that you're using for the mortgage. It can come from the title company who's handling all the closing and title work for the property. If you're in Florida, then you're gonna pay different documentary stamps and recording fees to the state and the county where you're buying a home. You're gonna have to put money into an escrow account with the lender for taxes and insurance. You're gonna have to pay your insurance premium at the time of closing in full so that your property's insured when you close on it. So those are the differences between a down payment and a closing cost, right? Down payment, we determine, becomes equity in your property. If you sold the property, you'll get that equity back. So you're getting your down payment back, you sell the home. Closing costs, you don't get back. That money is gone once you close on the property, regardless of how soon you decide to sell it, if you decide to sell it after closing, right? So it's true costs. Common closing costs, as I said, are gonna come from the title company, the lender, government. And a good rule of thumb, now there's no exact number for closing costs, right? I'm gonna give you a general rule of thumb. I hear realtors talk about this. I've heard this thrown around a bit, but let's just use it for this video just to make things simple for you to understand. Consider that closing costs are roughly 3% of whatever the sale price of the property might be. So if you're buying a $400,000 property, 3% of that's $12,000, right? So just assume that it's gonna be roughly 3%. In this case, we'll call it 12%. But you have to keep in mind that closing costs can vary from home to home. There's not just a set amount that closing costs are, right? We're using that as a general rule, but it could be different. It could be based on the county where you're buying, right? As an example, you know, I'm in both Palm Beach and Broward counties where we do most of our lending. So Broward County, the buyer chooses the title company. In Broward County or Miami-Dade County, but in Broward County, the buyer chooses. That means that they pay for the title insurance policy when they buy a home. Well, someone buying in Broward County is gonna be paying more in closing costs than somewhere, let's say, in Palm Beach County. And the reason that is because in Palm Beach County, the seller selects the title company and pays for the title insurance. So title insurance can be thousands of dollars. But the reason you can't say closing costs are roughly the same from home to home is because of that right there, right? Someone buying in Palm Beach County for a $400,000 home will probably pay $2,000 less than someone buying a $400,000 home in Broward County, right? Just keep these numbers in mind. It's important to know. Your lender can go over this with you. If you're able to get a seller credit, right, from a seller, you get a seller credit, which is money from the seller that you can use toward your closing costs. It's going to reduce the total amount of money that you need out of your pocket at the time of closing, but it's going to decrease the amount of money that goes in the seller's pocket at the time of closing. You can go ahead and use a seller credit if you can negotiate one to get a lower interest rate, or maybe, you know, by paying points, or maybe buying down the rate temporarily. You might have heard of temporary rate buy downs. And you want to know more about those, it's a way to go ahead and get a lower rate for the first couple years of your loan. Watch my video specifically on temporary rate buy downs. I explain it in detail so you get a better understanding of how it could benefit you as a home buyer. But you can use seller credits for those things, right? Those would be part of your closing costs. What's a negative of requesting a seller credit? Because those were all positives. Well, negative is it could definitely be less attractive to a seller because, like I said, they're going to net less money on the sale, right? The less money that's going in the seller's pocket, certainly not attractive to the seller, right? So you want to keep these in mind. It could be a reason you wouldn't want to ask for a seller credit. Now, depending on the market that you're in, certainly makes a difference in what's possible and what's not. If there's less offers on a property, well, it's more likely you can get a seller credit, right? We see a lot of them. We saw more of them when rates were a little bit higher. Rates have come back down a bit. So we're seeing it a little bit less, but it still happens. But Point being is when you get into these multiple offer situations and you're submitting an offer, it's less likely a seller is going to accept the offer that's asking for money versus one that's not, right? In the form of a seller credit. It just makes it appear weaker in the perception of the listing agent and the seller because they wonder, why does this person need funds to buy a home, right? Why do I need to give part of my money to, go ahead and help this person buy their property? Now, there's multiple reasons why, but just to get in the psyche of a seller, those are things you're going to think about and why it could potentially be a negative to ask for a seller credit. Now, what's a negotiation strategy when asking for a seller credit? Well, we've seen this done multiple ways. For one, you can just outright ask for the seller credit. You can, instead of going in and asking them to reduce the purchase price, you might say, okay, I know that homes are selling for 3% less on average than what their asking price might be. I'm just gonna ask for a 3% seller credit and go in at the full asking price, right? You can present it that way. That's a way to kind of go into it and think about it and maybe present it to the seller, right? And their agent. I've seen it where maybe you increase the purchase price beyond what you were thinking about offering and kind of build it in. It's almost allowing you to finance what the credit would be. Right? Let's just say the property you want to buy is $300,000, but there's enough value there to support 310. There's comparable sales in the market that we know it would appraise for 310, and you're a little short on funds. Maybe you're going for a lower down payment option, like 3% or 3.5%. So that money for the closing costs really, really matters to, not that it doesn't matter to anyone, but it really matters more to you because you're short on funds. You really need that seller credit to make the numbers work. Well, you might say, you know what? I'm going to offer 310. So 10 grand more, because 10 grand is like $60 a month in my payment, but it's gonna allow the seller to give me back 10 grand. So if the seller wants 300 for their property, you're offering them 310, asking them for 10 grand back, seller still gets their 300, but you're getting 10,000. So as long as that appraisal that's done on the property supports 310, well, now your closing costs of 10 grand are gonna help you reduce the amount of money you need out of your pocket, potentially getting into a home for just the down payment. You can actually use this credit, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I was mentioning buy downs. You can use that credit for a temporary rate buy down, but you want to explain that to a seller, because sometimes seeing that in writing and explaining to a seller, explaining to the realtor, well, hey, you know what, my buyer, or me as the buyer, I wasn't even in the market to buy a property right now. However, knowing about these temporary rate buy downs and the fact that I can get an interest rate that's 2% below where market rates are, it really just, piqued my interest in wanting to buy. So I wouldn't even have been a buyer for your home without a temporary rate buy down option and that being brought to my attention. So what I need from you, seller, is I need a credit of whatever amount to use toward my temporary rate buy down, because that's the whole reason I'm buying a home right now. And the whole reason you're going to be able to sell your home to me is because of the possibility of a temporary rate buy down, right? But it's all about presenting these things during the process and up front, so that way you can negotiate that. Other reasons you might want a seller credit to help with closing costs is because you have enough money for your down payment, but you maybe want to make improvements to the home after closing. Maybe you know that you're going to want to repaint, or you're going to want whatever. It could be a million things. Who knows what it is? You just know you want to do them, and you have a general idea of what the costs might be. Well, you might say, seller, I need a credit of this amount, because now when they're giving you a seller credit to use toward your closing costs, the money you would have had to pay for your closing costs is still in your bank account. And now after you close, you can use that money to go ahead and pay for whatever improvements they were that you wanted to go ahead and work on after you close on the property. Now, you can ask for a dollar amount from the seller, or you can ask for a percentage from the seller, right? There are limits on how much you can actually receive in the form of a seller credit, depending on the type of loan that you're obtaining. And your lender's gonna have to explain this to you, but it's important that you understand the maximum credits allowed based on the type of loan you're getting, because those credits can range anywhere from 3% to 9. And that's based on a combination of the type of loan and the down payment on the type of loan. Let's talk about, that was really the first where you want to negotiate up front, but I mentioned there's 2 times to negotiate for a seller credit. So the second time that we often see buyers negotiating for a seller credit is after the home inspection takes place. Most home inspections are going to show something needs to be repaired. If it doesn't, that's a red flag. There's no home that's perfect and doesn't need anything fixed, even brand new homes, right? So if there's items needing repair, maybe rather than asking for the seller to repair those items, you might instead say, you know what? You don't have to fix anything. Of course, if it's something that's not going to affect your ability to live in the property, you might say, just give me a $5,000 credit toward my closing costs, and I'm going to accept the property in its as-is condition. You don't need to fix anything, right? So that's a time that you can go back after you've already been under contract and try to negotiate for a seller credit. It's definitely a common time that we see it happen. So it's either at the very beginning of the process or after your home inspection. So if you're planning to make an offer on a home and you need guidance on how to request a seller credit prior to submitting the offer, then please leave a comment below and I'll reply and be happy to provide you with any possible guidance I can. And make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one.